Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. We are the co-founders of Natural Pregnancy and Birth. I'm Atara,
And I'm Tori.
and today we'll be talking about exclusive pumping. Tori, you have a lot of experience in this area. So my first question for you is, did you start out breastfeeding or pumping exclusively?
I started out breastfeeding. I breastfed for about 7 weeks. And then we've talked in another video, I actually went through a journey of relactation. So I totally stopped breastfeeding. My milk totally dried up. And we exclusively formula fed for about 2 months. And then I decided that I wanted to go back to some form of breastfeeding and ended up just deciding to exclusively pump. And so I've been exclusively pumping for almost 7 months now. 7 months.
7 months. Wow, that's a long time.
It is a long time. But it feels like the blink of an eye too. It feels like forever ago that I started, and just like yesterday. You know how it feels when you have a baby.
Yeah,
So
time is very, very strange once babies come along. My daughter's 4, well, she'll be 5 soon, and I'm just like, where did the time go? How was the transition to bottle feeding for your baby?
Initially it was difficult, like at that 7 week mark when we went from breastfeeding to exclusively formula feeding because he had never had a bottle before. And we went not totally cold turkey, but almost cold turkey because he was just having so many troubles with nursing. And we were switching him to formula. So it was both things that were new, both formula and the bottle. So it was difficult at first, and we did find a lot more success in having his dad bottle feed him, and then my mom, his grandma, bottle feed him versus me initially because, I was just associated with feeding at the breast. And so we did have more success initially with that. And then he did transition fairly quickly, I think, just because it was something that we were pushing so often. So it was difficult at first, but he caught on pretty quick.
Well, thanks for sharing. And it's really good that you were able to have that extra support when you were going through that transitional phase. How often do you pump to maintain your supply?
So initially, because I was relactating, I pumped every 2 hours to reestablish a supply. I would say that like before, so I did pump for a while to decrease my milk supply, and I pumped for a while to maintain my supply before we went fully to formula because I just wasn't sure that that's what we wanted to do. And at that point in time, I was able to pump every 6 hours and maintain a full supply just shortly after, like at 7 weeks postpartum. I was able to pump every 6 hours because he was feeding every 3 hours just on one side. So that was a lot more manageable to be able to maintain a full supply. And eventually I got to that point. But when I first started exclusively pumping, I was pumping every 2 hours, and then it kind of stretched out to every 3 hours. And I pumped every 3 hours, which came out to about 6 or 7 times a day to maintain my supply. And then I've also had milk in the freezer from when I weaned off initially. And so that provided a lot of has provided a lot of support in a way, in that like I don't always have to pump every day what he needs because he can eat out of the freezer as well. And then currently he is 11 months. So right now I am going from 4 pumps a day to 3 pumps a day because we're working on weaning down, which feels great. So yeah, currently I pump 3 times a day, and it'll just get fewer and fewer. Currently my plan is to keep pumping twice a day, like in the morning and at night, for as long as my milk supply stays around with only those 2 pumps a day, because I definitely have noticed a decrease every time I drop a pump. After about 2 weeks, my milk supply kind of levels out. and I don't pump as much. So right now, as he starts to turn a year, my plan is to just pump twice a day until my supply kind of diminishes.
Okay. Well, it's good that, a little less work is always a good thing in this journey of motherhood. So I'm glad that you're finding like that happy medium. This brings me to my next question, which is, do you prefer electric or manual pumps?
I have tried manual pumps, but I was never able to get them to work for me. So I've always used electric. And I use the Medela pump and style. I found that to be a really simple and straightforward. You push one button and it's on. You push one button and it's off. And that's something that worked for me because I never struggled to like keep my milk supply up. I think that some of the more complex pumps like the Spectra, I have one of those too, and you do modes and you do let down and you do this and that, and I think that's better for some women, but my body just seemed to respond well to just one mode, that I pump the whole 20 minutes on one mode, and that seems to work for me. So that's the one that I really like. And then I also use hands-free pumps when I'm away from the house. So I use the Mom Cozy brand, which I think is really great. It's made it a lot easier when we go places or when we're at family gatherings or we're traveling somewhere. That's a lot easier than taking the whole pump with me. So
Right. What do you love and dislike about pumping?
I mean, what I dislike is it is a lot of work. It is a lot of washing. I wash bottles, I wash pump parts, I replace pump parts, a year. It's a lot of work. There's a lot more stuff involved with it than just breastfeeding. And sometimes it can feel like double the hours. I feel like that at first, that I was spending 20 minutes pumping and then I was spending 20 minutes feeding him that bottle that I just pumped. So everything took twice as long. But that's gotten better as he's gotten older too, and he's able to hold his own bottle, or he's much less picky in how he's fed, so he can eat while I'm pumping the bottle that I pumped before. And then the other thing that's really hard about it is traveling. When you travel with milk, or you're traveling with your pump, and how do you plug your pump in, or do you need to charge your pump, or how do you clean your pump parts? That is more difficult, but it's still doable. We've still done it. So then the things that I love about pumping is that I think that it's given me a lot more freedom to do a lot of the things that you can't do when you're the only source of food for your baby. So it gives me longer times that I can be away from him if I want to go hang out with friends, or I've gone to see my sister out of town, and that's fine. He's fine here with his dad. It has allowed us to that my husband wakes up with him in the night instead of me having to wake up with him in the night, because my husband is much more capable of running on broken sleep than I am. And so that freedom it's been a lot for my mental health to be in a better place, and my physical health to be in a better place, because I can sleep through the night and he can handle night feedings. So, and then, I do, I'm really glad that I can give my baby breast milk and he can have those extra nutrients and those extra antibodies, especially when he's sick and things like that, that I can go back to the freezer and get transition milk. And so that's another thing that I'm really glad that I was able to get my milk supply back for those reasons, just nutritionally, and for his immune system to be able to give him breast milk. So yeah.
I'm glad that you have found like what works best for you. And like you mentioned, mental health and all of that, it's really, really, really important. And the fact that you have that extra support, from your husband to step in those times is great as well. You had mentioned before a little bit about like traveling and things like that, but as a mother who pumps, like what is in your travel bag?
Usually it's a whole bag in itself of all the stuff I need. Usually when we travel, I have like a bag with my pump, and then like the Medela pump and style comes with both a wall plug-in and a battery plug-in, and usually I end up taking both with us because the batteries don't last super long, but sometimes you need them. Sometimes you plug it in, sometimes you can't. And then I do have 2 sets of pump parts, so I take both of them. Usually I have both pumps with me. Then I have my hands-free pump with me. That I have so like 1 pump and 2 pumps, 1 for each breast, and then the charger for that. And I've also loved the Medela has pump wipes, so like you can wipe your pump parts down without washing them if you need to do that. I found that was really helpful when we're in the car and we might have access to a bathroom, but I'm not sure how clean the water is. It's not something that I like to do often, but when you're in a pinch, it can be really good. And then I have like nipple cream. I have struggled some, especially pumping through the winter, with just getting like super dry nipples and the skin around the areola, just from the friction that comes with pumping, especially pumping so many times a day. And nipple cream I found is really helpful in just like both lubricating the shield when you put it on, and afterwards just putting it on to just kind of be able to sit on there in between pumping sessions. And then a bottle brush for when you're going to wash your pump parts. That might be it. I'm probably forgetting something because I always forget something, but those are the essentials, I would say.
It sounds like you have quite a long list, so good job remembering all.
Oh, the other thing I was thinking was then like the struggle too is if you don't pump and immediately give it to your baby. That's the hardest part for me, because then you have to keep the milk cold enough that it's okay to give your baby later. So that's hard. Sometimes we have a cooler with ice in it, and then you have to have a way to warm the milk back up, because like my baby wouldn't take ice cold milk. He'd take room temperature milk, but he wouldn't take ice cold milk. And so like a portable bottle warmer too. I know the one time we went on a long trip, we had both of those things as well. So
wow. So like a whole suitcase basically.
A whole suitcase basically.
What advice do you have for moms who pump exclusively?
I would think the biggest thing that I've learned to be true, and that I really didn't expect, was how consistent you have to be. And I knew that was the case, but you don't realize how hard it is to be consistent when sometimes it feels like you don't have to be. And I mean that in like being consistent and pumping every 3 hours. If you know that you need to pump every 3 hours, baby eats every 3 hours, being consistent in that. And sometimes it was difficult, especially when I was sick or we were doing this thing or that thing, to stick to a really hard and fast schedule of pumping every 3 hours, because I had freezer milk to rely on, or we supplemented with formula here and there. And I don't think that it's bad if that's something that works for you. And there was situations that definitely was what was best for me, and what was best for my baby was to supplement with freezer milk or with formula. But it always did affect my milk supply if I did that more than a couple days in a row. Especially, like I said, when I was sick, I got COVID a couple months ago, and that really affected my milk supply. And it's always possible to get it back, but you have to realize the work that it takes to up your pumping sessions and get it back. And so I think just being, I would say realistic, because I think it's totally fine if you need to drop a pumping session and supplement for a while, if that's what you need to do for your body, and being gentle with yourself if that's what happens, because it's totally fine. but realizing that that's the work that it takes to continue to exclusively pump. And then on that same note of like having grace for yourself is I've also traveled without my baby before. And I think that there's a lot of stigma around pumping and dumping when you're gone from your baby. And I found that for myself, it was so hard to keep milk the right temperature and to travel with it in the car and things like that. And I had to give myself permission to pump and dump and be okay with it and know that I had other milk for my baby and it was fine if I couldn't save this milk. Because I think that there's a lot out there in the breastfeeding community of it just being liquid gold, and it totally is, but it's not worth you stressing about to get it home. So that's something I'd want to say to a lot of moms is it is okay if you can't get it home. Yeah, I think those would be my two pieces of advice, and they both boil down to you're doing a really hard thing and you're doing a really great thing for your baby and exclusively pumping, and you need to be gentle with yourself and have grace for yourself when it doesn't always go exactly according to the schedule and exactly according to plan, because that's just not how it always is. And that's okay.
Right. And that's actually really, really, really great advice. You know, just being realistic about expectations and everything. Sometimes things change. Yeah, so that's great advice. And you know, this is pumping exclusively is the reality for a lot of moms, whether they're, you know, they have work or whatever their circumstances may be. So I hope that whoever's watching is able to get something from you know, your experiences and apply it to theirs. And as we know, mom guilt is very, very real. And I can only imagine how you felt in those times when you had to like dump milk. I've been there. I don't have a whole lot of experience with pumping exclusively. I've only had to do it like once. And when I had to dump that milk, I almost cried. So I know exactly how that is. But yes, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I hope that our listeners were able to get something from this. And if our listeners would subscribe to our email newsletter, you'll be the first to know about, you know, videos that we share and blog posts and all of that. And you mentioned relactation earlier, so we'll go ahead and link that video as well. So thank you so much, Tori, for your time, and thanks for sharing. And thank you to all of our listeners as well. And we'll see you next time.